and conducted our technical analysis and our development of the proposed network, as well as the implementation strategy. So we're here before you tonight for consideration and any questions that you may have about the draft bicycle master plan. So just briefly to touch on how the plan was developed, as I mentioned, we had many community engagement events, as well as consistent involvement from our citizen advisory group, the Sustainability Infrastructure Commission, and our technical advisory group, which was comprised of city staff. We held events throughout the entire planning process. One of our most exciting ones was the citywide bike tour and pop-up separated bike lane. And I know that some of you joined us out there and participated, and we appreciate that. And then we also held over 6 outreach events for the draft bicycle network and had over 150 participants give their feedback in person. And then from there, we also held an open house for the draft plan so that people could review the draft plan and ask us questions and continue to provide their input. We paired the a little bit paused. There we go. We paired the community input with also a data-driven process. So we conducted a collision analysis. We also conducted a level of traffic stress, and this really looks at which streets are high stress or low stress for people to bicycle on. We also conducted a bicycle network connectivity analysis to look at which areas of the city are currently well connected by the bicycle network and which are not. And we did a trip potential analysis to identify areas with high potential for bicycle trips. So the plan was developed based on the public comment as well as our data-driven process, and we went through, we pulled all the information together to develop the administrative draft plan, which city staff reviewed and provided input upon, and then we developed the full draft plan, which went out for public comment in late 2019. And then since then, we've revised the plan and have presented the final draft plan to the Sustainability and Infrastructure Commission, and now we're here before you tonight. So I'll take a quick walk through the plan. The first chapter is really in the introduction, why we're doing this, what our process was. The second, the chapter 2 looks at what are the goals and objectives. So what is our plan really trying to address here in San Mateo? And so our goals for this plan are connectivity, safety and comfort, building a community around bicycle culture, equity, and increasing ridership. So all of our recommendations really link back to these goals and objectives as a part of chapter 2. And then here's a snapshot of what each goal looks like, along with metrics for tracking progress over time. Chapter 3 is a snapshot of your existing bicycle network. So looking at this looks at the analysis that I spoke about, and then also what does the existing bicycle network look like and where does it connect to? We provide a map and also a length of the existing facilities, and we really dig into what's there today and how can we take what's going well and the great opportunities and build upon it to create an even stronger, more comfortable network. So chapter 4 is where we really get into the meat of the matter. This bicycle network that we're proposing as a part of this plan is what we call an all ages, all abilities network. So we recognize that there's some folks who are going to bicycle no matter what, that they're confident riders, they feel confident riding with traffic, and they're going to choose to bike no matter what facilities are on the ground. But there's about 60% of folks, and this is a nationwide statistic, but that we've really found is backed up by smaller community studies, which is that 60% of folks are only going to bicycle if there is a comfortable and safe way to do so. So if we really want to move the needle on the number of folks who are biking for errands or for pleasure or to work, then we really need to provide them with a safe and well-connected network that they know when they leave their house, they can reach their destination by bike through a connected network. So the chapter 4 really outlines this. This is an overview of the bicyclist typologies that I was mentioning. And you'll see that middle group, the interested but concerned, is where we're really addressing our facilities. And this doesn't leave out the confident riders. They can also bike use these facilities or in the street, but it really serves the majority of riders. So we use guidelines from the AASHTO Bicycle Guide to provide guidance for our recommendations, and we really look at what are the speeds and volumes, and this is how we come up with the proposed network. So first, a quick look at the network. We're proposing 70 infrastructure projects, which is 102 miles of bicycle facilities. This includes some new facility types for San Mateo, separated bike lanes and bicycle boulevards. And we also identify intersection improvements, which is often where people feel most vulnerable. So it's important to also focus on improving the intersections. So here's an overview of the types of facilities that we're recommending. And now I'm going to pass it over to Sue Ellen. We love this photo. I'm going to pass it over to Sue Ellen to talk about the support programs as well as the implementation strategy.
Yeah, thanks. Before we go there, can we go back to that slide? I totally missed it. It went by in like 3 seconds. Thanks. For a minute, just for a minute.
Sure. So you'll see the 6 images, the one on the left, these are the recommended bikeway types, and they go from most protected down to the facilities that provide the least protection. So shared use path can be shared by bicyclists and pedestrians, and an example of that would be the Bay Trail. And then you have a separated bike lane, which is physically separated from vehicular traffic. And we have ideas in the plan for how you can develop this over time, that you can start with less expensive materials and then over time move to more permanent materials. But that way you can make a big impact right away and really get people biking right away by these sort of more rapid implementation ideas. A buffered bike lane provides a painted buffer, and these are really appropriate, and we're starting also to get where they're more appropriate with lower speeds and lower volumes. So you wouldn't want to propose a buffered bike lane on a roadway that has a lot of cars moving quickly. And then your traditional bike lane, which you have many of and you're familiar with. A bicycle boulevard, these pair signage and on-the-ground paint with traffic calming measures. So it's not just painting a sharrow as is shown on the image, but it's also ensuring that there are ways that cars, they travel slowly, drivers know to expect bicyclists. So we've proposed those in the plan, mainly in your neighborhood roadways. And then bike routes, which y'all have already, and these are most appropriate. We've identified these in downtown San Mateo, where the right-of-way is just too constrained to put in something wider, basically. And so these are areas of the city where cars are already traveling slowly. They're expecting people in biking or walking already. And then you'll see some intersection treatment examples, raised crossings and protected intersections. Most of the intersections in the plan that we recommend improvements for may require additional study, and so these are just some options, whereas we're much more specific about which recommended bikeways we recommend on specific streets. And one last thought, and then I'll pass it over, is that we have looked at the engineering feasibility of these recommendations. So we did look at what it takes to implement this and the width of the existing roadways, that kind of thing. So you can really, your staff will really be able to hit the ground running with improvements.
Okay. So chapter 4 went into the nuts and bolts of what types of facilities are proposed for each roadway. Chapter 5 gets into the support programs and the policies. We can build the facilities on our roadways, but without pairing that with education, encouragement, enforcement, and then later evaluating what's been put on the ground and ensuring that there's equitable distribution of our network throughout the city, those facilities may not be used as much as we'd like. So Chapter 5 really gets into all of the support programs that are recommended, including description and then the goals of the Bike Master Plan that each of those support programs really hits on. This is based off of the 6 E's for a bicycle-friendly community, so engineering, encouragement, education, enforcement, equity, and evaluation and planning. So we've shown a snapshot of one of the portions of the table for encouragement. Some of those you might be familiar with, like Bike to Work Day, Safe Routes to School, which in our city has previously been funded through grant programs, and we're hopeful in the future might be funded with local funds. And then recommended programs like a Safe Routes for Seniors program, which has been implemented in a great way in other cities. And these programs have not been cost out yet, so we would have to do that as a part of implementing the programs. And then the funding for these types of programs may be through grants, they may be through local funds. Some of these programs are in coordination with other city departments like Parks and Rec, our police department, other partners that would be necessary in order to move these programs forward. So this is really a chapter that's focused on how do we get our city biking more, how do we teach our kids how to bike, how do we ensure that all ages and all abilities are using these facilities that we're building, and really the basis of building a bike-friendly community and one where people look at biking as a viable form of transportation. And then Chapter 6 is really how we're going to do this, and that's implementation and funding. So in this chapter, we've gone through the project prioritization. We have our proposed bikeway network, which, as Megan mentioned, is 70 projects. We need some sort of roadmap of how to implement those. And so we've gone through a prioritization exercise to determine which are high priority, which are medium high, et cetera, to give us guidance on what to implement first and what to prioritize. That list of 70 projects has been listed out by priority, and we have cost estimates for each project. So we know, including design, construction, contingency, how much these projects might cost us to actually do. Something that is new that we'll touch on in just a minute is a rapid implementation network that gives us a framework for how do we really hit the ground running, and then implementation strategy and funding. So going back to the prioritized project list, this is in Chapter 6. It's also in one of our appendices. It's every single project, every project segment identified with the extents for the project and what type of facility is recommended, and the prioritization. Just a note on the facilities that are recommended as separated bike lanes, those Class 4 facilities, you'll see 2 costs. There's a low cost and there's a high cost. So level 1 is that rapid implementation of the separated bike lanes. So that's being done using inexpensive materials like paint or plastic. The level 2, more expensive and more permanent implementation comes later, and that's with the concrete, the physical barriers, et cetera. So just a note so you know what you're looking at there. So this is the same recommended proposed bicycle network, flipped on its side just to keep it interesting, with all the priorities applied. And that prioritization framework was based on connectivity, it was based on safety, it was based on equity. So all of the goals of our plan fed into the prioritization, and every single project was assigned a priority based on how it met the goals of the plan. This map further gets into what are the high and the medium high projects. So going back to this map, which is our full network with all of the priorities, these are the ones that are really the highest priority in terms of meeting the goals of our plan. We have paper copies to hand out in case those aren't clear. So the rapid implementation network is new for this plan, and it's a really interesting approach in order to give us what we need in order to hit the ground running really quickly. So these are all types of facilities. For the recommended Class 4 facilities, it is the level 1 implementation with paint and plastic. These are short-term projects that can be done quickly and get us a connected bike bikeway network really soon. And that bike network, I think that we went into it more at the commission hearing. The network, we keep calling it a bikeway network. It is for all forms of mobility. So for micro-mobility devices like e-scooters, they're able to use this network because in California, e-scooters are supposed to be on the roadway. So in blue, you'll see all of our existing facilities, and the yellow rapid implementation network projects have been identified to connect our system fully, to give us north-south options, to give us east-west options, which we heard through our community outreach were lacking, and really serve to connect in what we have and make it a cohesive, safe network that we can do in the near term, and that would benefit users of bicycles and micro-mobility devices. So here you can see a breakdown of that rapid implementation network. In total, it's 15 miles, which is a small portion of what our overall recommended bicycle network is. And again, these are just the projects to fill in our network, fill in the gaps, and give us a connected network so that our community can get out and start biking. In total, the estimated cost to implement the rapid implementation network is just under $4 million. Which brings us into the implementation and funding strategy. It was really important to city staff that we had a fully fleshed out implementation and funding strategy for this plan. It's great to have a plan, it's great to have an idea of what we want to do. We needed a roadmap for how to do that, and how to make sure that we could take this plan and start getting it done. So that rapid implementation network is in there, and then the funding strategy builds on what we've done in the past in terms of seeking grant funding, and looks toward the future in terms of what else we need to do in terms of funding in order to get bike facilities on the ground.
May through the chair. So this is the part I kind of really focused in on, and then I went to Appendix G, and I kind of went through all those various grants. But one thing that I really found missing that I thought maybe we could focus on is this idea of trying to find some private money. And I think when we do development, though, we couldn't earmark funds as a public benefit, could we? And maybe apply it to, let's say, some bike lanes in and around a particular development, or is that, or we have existing companies certainly that might be interested. I know some are in and around Bay Meadows where there might be some interest in enhancing what's around there by using private money or seeking private money. But I don't know about the development and being able to earmark.
Yes, on the development side, anytime we have something especially adjacent to their development, we require them to make those improvements.
Okay.
So, for instance, any development on Concord or in that area,
Sure.
we would ask them to do any improvements that we might be adjacent to that development. So that's, we look for those opportunities every time we can.
I didn't see that in Appendix G, but I hope it will go in there, as well as after development, but when employees might be using the roads in and around, and we might need an upgrade, that sort of thing.
Good point. We will make sure that's clear. All right. Project cost estimates. We've talked about this briefly. Our team, both staff and consultant team, went into each bikeway type and figured out a rough cost per mile for each type of facility, and that includes design, construction, materials, staging, and all of the other costs that go into fully constructing a project from the ground up. So those costs per mile were applied to the recommended bikeway network to figure out what the cost estimates were for each project. So for each of our 70 projects, we have the cost estimate based on that planning level cost estimate that was developed. As part of this project, the consultant team is currently in the process of developing concept designs for 8 intersections and for 4 roadway segments for the bike facilities that have been recommended. Those concept designs will give staff a really great starting point in terms of designing the project. So it gives us the ability to determine how those projects will actually be implemented, and gives us a basis for which to go for grant funding or for inputting the project information into our CIP program. These concept designs are for staff use and will give us, again, another opportunity to hit the ground running once the plan is adopted. they will not be part of the plan. They're for design use and for use for getting us moving. So during public comment on the draft plan, there were some comments regarding the progress on the 2011 bicycle master plan. So I just wanted to provide some feedback on that. Since the 2011 plan was adopted, 17 of the 26 high priority projects in that plan have been implemented or are currently in progress. Some are in progress as part of the grade separation project that we're all very aware of. There was some discrepancy between staff evaluation of what projects have been completed and that from public comment, and that was largely based on class 3 bike routes that were implemented with signage, the sharrows on the roadway. The roadway markings were implemented, the sharrows that are the pavement markings were implemented. The signage that was recommended in the plan was not installed because of right-of-way concerns on the sidewalk and wanting to maintain ADA access, which for us does take precedent. So those were deemed complete with just the pavement markings, and that conflict has been resolved. Many of the projects in the 2011 plan that were not completed have been included in the 2020 draft plan before you, and in many cases have been upgraded to more separated facilities, so they have certainly not been left behind. One of those projects is our citywide bicycle parking project. Our staff from Public Works worked overtime to get moving on implementing these projects. We have to give them a shout out. They worked overtime this weekend to install 33 bike racks at 12 locations. They have another installation planned shortly that will bring the total to 53 net new racks, and these are all at city recreation facilities. We're looking into the downtown bicycle parking project and identifying locations where those bike racks can be installed. In many cases, the bike racks that were identified as planned through that project were infeasible based on location, right-of-way, underground utilities, so we're trying to find new locations that work.
Gary?
Regarding the plan for the downtown parking, do you have any estimate, or is there any goal of when that will be completed?
We're working on identifying those locations this week and next week. Some have to be discussed if they're on private property, but we're aiming to do that as quickly as possible.
Is there any
and to take care of
target
that.
goal for when it will be done, or is it just we're working on it? We'll be done when we're done.
We're working on it and we're doing it as quickly as possible, and it would be based on staff availability to do the installation.
I think once we have the locations identified, we'll move quickly with the installation like we have with these as well. So I think the main work is identifying the locations and making sure we can fit them in appropriately in the downtown.
Okay, so as Megan mentioned, we went to the Sustainability and Infrastructure Commission with the same version of the draft plan that's in front of you tonight. The commission has recommended the draft plan to City Council for adoption with a few comments. The commission would like staff to update them on progress twice annually, which we've agreed to do. There is a goal in Chapter 5 on earmarking 5% of the roadway maintenance funds for bikeway facility maintenance. And that was done in order to ensure that once the facilities are on the ground, that they're maintained. And that includes street sweeping, that includes if delineators fall down, that they're replaced, that the striping is maintained in good order. So we will continue to update on progress in terms of that goal. And then there was a request to provide information on the integration of our proposed facility network and our city's paving programs through this Smooth Streets program. So in looking at the planned projects for the Smooth Streets program in the next year, about 1,100 feet of new bike boulevard that's recommended in our plan overlaps with the Smooth Streets program, which is not much, but everything counts for us. However, I do want to note that the funding for the Smooth Streets program is not intended for construction of bike projects. So as Megan had mentioned previously, a bike boulevard may be as simple as sharrows on the roadway and signage if possible. these traffic volumes and the speeds on that roadway are too high, then we need to do some traffic calming measures like speed cushions or curb extensions, and those are not programmed as part of the Smooth Streets project. So where we can, we will integrate it, but I just wanted to include that comment for consideration. And with that, I will hand it over to Brad for some additional funding considerations.
Yeah, thank you, Suan. So before I talk about the funding aspects here, I wanted to also touch on the more separated improvement types that we may try to implement. And as you all are aware, we have fairly narrow streets here in town with, so there are gonna be some challenges or trade-offs to implementing some of those, depending on the location. So those challenges or trade-offs would be parking. You may have to like a new parking on one side of the street, or even a road diet in some cases. So if we're gonna do any of that type of work, there will be extensive outreach so that we make sure people are knowing about that, we get feedback on how they feel, and they'll be fully analyzed before we implement anything like that as well. Regarding the funding, we've been funding bike and pedestrian projects both, mostly by grant funding. So we look for every opportunity we can to apply for grants that are available to us out there. So we're continuing to do that. And then we take on additional funding based on our capital improvement budget and in alignment with the council priorities. So if there's an opportunity for some money to be allocated for the bike master plan, for in this instance, we would bring that forward to you for approval within the capital program. One of the things we've been doing also is with any of our projects, we're looking for opportunities to do the improvements. So many of the paving projects, we've added bike lanes or other aspects that we could actually do easily and fairly inexpensively, so we're not taking away from the road money. So we look for those opportunities as well. Right now, as you know, your major priorities for capital costs are road paving, transportation issues like the major congested corridors or the TAP programs, the flood control project, high voltage streetlights, and our sidewalk repair program. Those are the major ones that we're involved with right now. And an example of our challenges with the funding is, so for fiscal year 2021 coming forward, we had some Measure A funding that we could allocate to other projects. It's likely that we'll come forward to you with a recommendation to use $650,000 of the money that's available, which is just around $700,000, so not much more after this, to continue the design of the Peninsula Avenue project or the environmental work that's being done. That work is obviously taken a little bit longer. We've had to do some extra things as we came to this study session with you before in addressing some of the City of Burlingame's concerns. So there's going to be about a $1.3 million additional cost to that to get that project to a PEIR stage completion. So we're going to work with the TA and hopefully split that cost with the TA. So those are the kind of trade-offs we have where we see opportunities, and we kind of thought we might have opportunity to do other things, but that project is very important as well. So those are kind of the funding challenges for us in moving this forward. We would love to implement it all at once, of course, but again, we'll look for every opportunity to do things with current projects or that come along, or through grant funding, and then whenever we have opportunities to utilize some of our other annual money, we'll bring those forward as well. That's it. Oh, yeah, so tonight we want to answer any of your questions. If we can provide you any additional information about the plan. And we'd like to find out from you whether you have any major concerns about the plan, or whether we can return back to you at a future, fairly future close meeting to adopt the plan and make it final.
Do I see 6 more slides?
Those are pocket slides. I do have client contact information.
Okay, great. Questions from the council? Anybody want to start? Go ahead, Eric.
For the recommendations from the Sustainability and Infrastructure Commission, you made a comment that the first one you agreed with. The other two what was staff's thoughts on those?
So on the 5% roadway maintenance, that's something that we would pick up probably in just our general maintenance with our city staff as far as sweeping and repairing, delineators and so forth. So, we're gonna wanna do that. I'm not sure we'll have to add, funding to that. We might over the course of a long period of time, but in the immediate future, we can probably handle those items. And then, for the third item there, it was just a matter of looking at whether, what overlapped and whether we can take advantage of some of the projects that do overlap. In thinking as Sue Ellen was talking, I think what we'd probably like to do is as that specific Smooth Street project comes forward, maybe we would look for some of our other, Measure A funds or something to maybe combine with, that specific street, and so we can get it all completed at once. So that's something I think we'll try to do as well.
And just to build on that comment, we've talked a lot, I've talked a lot in this presentation about the prioritization of all of our projects, and the identification of what's high priority, et cetera. We do leave ourselves room, in the plan and in implementation of the 2011 plan to capitalize on projects that are happening, during that time that may give us the opportunity to implement lower priority projects. So we won't necessarily be going along and checking off lists from the top to the bottom. We wanna make sure that we allow ourselves the opportunity to be nimble and implement projects as the opportunity comes along, even if they are technically lower priority projects.
Any other questions from council? If not, I'm gonna go to public comment. Any public comment?
I have one speaker set here,
Drew?
Michael Reagan.
Oh, just kidding. Mr. Reagan?
And if you could go to the microphone, please, so we can capture it on video, that would be awesome.
This came out yesterday, I just wanted to see if you're on that, thank you.
Unfortunately, we have a whole nother, study session to get to, so I'm gonna try to hold it to a couple of minutes.
Oh, yeah, no, that's fine. I just thought you'd have,
Thank you very much.
I'll give you one.
Okay, people always forget about me.
I can't help you with that.
Can't help me out.
Well, yeah, I'll make it quick, but I just gave this so I don't have to spend the time going over it. But to, quickly on this, Palo Alto today actually is restarting their e-scooter pilot program. And if you look at it, once they start at Mountain View, Sunnyvale will also be jumping in and doing this type of thing. So it's something that's definitely, we all need to jump on this type of thing. So I think just reading that over, you'll see. And then if anybody's interested, Green Caltran, Friends of Caltran blog, so it's in there. Just make some quick points. I'll give you an example of why this is so important. I went to that meeting in Central Park regarding the 221 units that you're looking into approving. And they said they're gonna put in a bike storage unit there. And I said, great, but you try getting out of there once that building's built and try to ride a bike around 4th Avenue, it's not gonna work. So, bike lanes and improvement need to be made in order for that type of, that type of bike facility, and telling people that they can use bikes is gonna be, really gonna be effective. Plus the railroad corridor, moving as what you guys are doing now with moving the railroads, the train station in Hillsdale and that type of thing, bringing it up. That all needs to be coordinated with the bike routes. So it's another way of saying that, it's important that we somehow make this type of improvements important. So the biggest problem is what? Money. And we've discussed this all the way along. It's like if you have a kitchen, if your refrigerator goes out, or you want the kitchen painted, what are you gonna do? You're gonna probably replace the refrigerator. So I know maybe this isn't a high priority, and I understand from going to these meetings, the expense that running the city is, and somehow this maybe drops to the bottom of the importance. But I think as far as in the future, I think this will become an important factor. So what I was proposing, I heard about ways about getting money into it, and I think this is a perfect opportunity, because I think right now, from the people that I've spoken with throughout San Mateo, and I work all around this city, is traffic, it's getting around, it's moving around, it's the difficulty.
Thank you, Mr. Reagan. What was your idea about funding?
My idea on funding is people are really, had it with traffic, and what I would propose is some kind of measure on a bill stating to people, getting the citizens involved, saying, hey, we want to take this money, make road improvements for the safety aspect of it, for, just with the new age of all the issues that we have.
Sales tax or a parcel tax?
Well,
or
I'm not
something?
sure how you would propose it. That would be something that these gentlemen would probably put it together, but you could also include the improvements with the bicycle improvements along with the traffic improvements.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Safety and that type of thing.
Thank you.
And hopefully that may be something that, that will work to getting this project done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Drew?
Good evening, everyone. So I think there's a lot of great things in this plan. I give it like a 2 thumbs up. I've been watching it since the beginning, and I've gone to other cities and been watching and given feedback on other cities, and I just think San Mateo's done a bang-up job on a lot of fronts. There's just a long list of things, including just out here, O'Farrell, the end to get over 92, and getting that pegged out for development that's coming, and there's an easement right there, and just saying we want that easement. Might be 30 years before there's a bike ped across 92, but we've reserved the land on this side to make that happen. And that's important, and that's what this plan fleshed out. There's an example right there and stuff. So, I appreciate that. I think there's grant money coming, like Measure W. I've been in other things from Measure W, but it takes staff time and it takes matching dollars. So it's not free, but there's a lot. And we're set up, except we need those other things and stuff. And then I think they did a great job on the capturing like the long-term, some stuff. They have a page in there about aspirational goals, which are really true, so we can have those in the background without pegging those as some promises. And those are really about overcrossing, Caltrain tracks and some stuff. And I think that's great. Other cities have struggled to capture that. And it's like, I look at the Burlingame for the new Facebook campus over 101. It's crying for an overpass there, and Burlingame won't put it into their plan. And it's right at the edge of the peninsula overchange. It's kind of like, and it's like the vision here in San Mateo to be able to like capture that kind of stuff. So I really appreciate that. And my one plug to kind of on that is just, there's a little space on the page, is just one more bullet that says the Caltrain business plan and the grade set projects as those develop, possibly look for opportunities for more connectivity as that $1 billion project gets developed in the coming years.
Thank you very much, Drew. Appreciate it. Any further public comments? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public comment period, bring it back to the council for final comments. Does anybody want to go first? Seeing none, I'll go first.
Okay.
I'm going to be very brief. So, number one, this is critical. The importance, it cannot be overstated. This is something that needs to happen right now with density and with all the traffic that we see. We need to give people other opportunities. Number two, it needs to happen soon. It needs to happen now. Number three, I think we have exhausted Class 1 space. Class 1 includes Sharrows, right?
Class 3,
Excuse me,
but that's okay.
I always do that in my head. Class 3 includes Sharrows.
That's right.
Sharrows are not bike lanes. Sharrows are not gonna get anybody who doesn't ride a bike right now to ride a bike. So it doesn't add anybody on the streets. It doesn't take anybody out of their cars. My personal opinion, I'm interested in my other council members' opinion, is I don't see the value in adding any more Sharrows. Class 2, where you have a dedicated space, is much better, but doesn't Class 2 also, it doesn't eliminate the threat of getting doored, right? You could still have parking that's right next door, and you could get endured. So it doesn't eliminate the threat. I love the idea of paint and plastic everywhere. Really would move the needle and get more people out of their cars and onto a bicycle and create better transportation options. Those are my thoughts. This is critical, it's important, but we need to keep our eye on the thing that's going to get people out of their cars, and that's class 1 and class 2, not class 3
And 4.
or 4. No more 4, no more 3. 1 and 2 is what it takes, and just final comment that I'll make is that I would be open to adding something on the ballot, or whether it's one of the revenue enhancements we've talked about already, or increasing the sales tax. I'd be open to that to make these kinds of infrastructure improvements because I think they're that important. Those are all my comments. Diane?
I want to say that I appreciate, what did you call them? Not the interim, the ones you thought you could do. I knew it started with an I. The rapid implementation, because the total program does look rather daunting cost-wise, but I appreciate this idea of the rapid implementation, because we're gonna chunk away of it. No doubt about the priority of it, the need for it, the need for safety, the need to get people on their bikes. But I appreciate the way you broke it out, and you know how I feel about private funding as well.
I'll just add to that. I also was really glad to see the rapid implementation plan broken out. I agree with Mayor Goethals about moving the needle further, faster, prioritizing the class 1 and 2, and I also I had sort of a question about the ranking of and prioritization of and weighting of collisions in the metrics the metric spreadsheet that you did. It looked like you weighted the level of traffic stress higher than the collision history, and I would question that as a practice. I think it makes more sense to me to weight collision history higher. And as we look to the rapid implementation plan to give a very high prioritization to areas that have a high collision history. So I would like to see those things more coupled. I completely agree with Councilmember Hoppen that there probably are private sector collaboration opportunities that we haven't considered and should be considering, like, you know, Cisco bike path, like that could be a thing. And then also the potential of regional collaborations to get county funding. You know, I think that there might be ways. I question if there are ways to make ourselves stronger grant applicants through collaborations with neighboring cities, and also, you know, if it does make sense to put a set-aside fund that can be matched, that might come from private sector dollars, or might come from city funds. We'll see, and have that be a jumping point that we can leverage for grant applications. So I think we should, you know, throw everything we can at funding this and resourcing it. I've heard from the community a high level of support and also a high level of fatigue about participating in, you know, a decades plus long plan and only seeing, you know, parts of it implemented. And I think that, you know, the idea of doing the updates to the commission is great. I would strongly advise that we give them updates about the grant and funding strategies as well, just in addition.
Eric?
Yeah, I'll be real quick because I agree with almost all the comments said so far. I think that when we're talking about the amount of housing that we're going to need to be adding to San Mateo over the next decade, I mean, this is of critical importance to get people out of their cars. And I agree with Mr. Reagan, who was speaking, saying that if we're gonna be planning for people not to need parking, new residents not to need parking, we have to meet the other side of it and make it easier to ride a bike. I mean, it doesn't matter how much bike parking we have if nobody's gonna get off. I have mixed feelings about the rapid implementation program. Kind of, it's a little bit of what the mayor was talking about and a little bit what Councilmember Pappen was talking about. I think it's great that we get something going and show what we're making progress. But I agree with the mayor that just painting arrows on the street and saying we have a network doesn't do much. And like I was thinking, I saw I live right by Notre Dame, and that's gonna be part of the network. Well, it's a pretty safe place to drive right now. I don't know if investing the funds to make the arrows on it and put the little bicycle on it is gonna be a really good use of funds to say we have a network. So I think we gotta balance the appearance of having the rapid implementation network with making it substance and making it actually make it easier for bike riders of all ages to get on. So.
Thanks. I got a few comments. I'm looking at the map on page 38, I guess, and then I'm reading the text on page 39, and it says that as they appear, class 1 and then class 4 and then class 2, they're listed by order of separation. So I guess the class 1 is the best, the shared use path, which you showed, right? There are no cars involved. It's just a path with bikes and pedestrians. So that's great where we can do that. The separated bike lanes, I guess, are the next best thing actually on streets. I saw where the men were showing building the actual separation. That's a great thing where we have, I guess, the space to do that. As you mentioned, downtown, we don't have that space. And then the buffered bike lanes, class 2, and standard bike lanes, class 2. These and class 3 I see as class 2 in some places, like downtown, will end up being ultimately the only thing that we can do for lack of space to do anything better, I guess. But between them and class 3, I see those as transitional, and thus I think the rapid implementation plan is a good thing because it'll give guidance to drivers and show them that their other users are on this road and we need to respect them. And I think that we have different levels of bike riders. Some who are afraid to try it all and won't do anything unless they see a separated lane. And we have plenty of others who've been biking already, but they're leery of some places because it is a little scary there. This will give them some guidance, some backup. They know that there are lines on the road, maybe some signs on the side of the street that motorists can see. So I actually approve of that, and I think that's a good approach. Because I've been looking at the bicycle master plan for 10 years now. So I think that I would rather not see it take another 10 years for us to get to something that's usable at least. Okay, I appreciate that we're working mostly with grants. I understand that, and I think it's a great thing, but to the extent that we could also find other, like you mentioned, Brad, we do have some other one-time money coming up. If we can put that toward this kind of, that's a great, I like that approach too. So I want to say thank you. I appreciate this, and I think it's good work. I just want to giddy up.
Thank you. Thank you all, and we'll see you when you bring back the final plan. Appreciate it. We love this project.
Great.
We want to give you a bunch of money.
I heard it's a priority as well, so that's why.
And I want to thank Mr. Reagan for his comments too. Thank you.
Kathy, come on up.
Oh, and Drew, of course. Thank you, Drew.
No, I heard you specifically leave them out.
Although it took about 20 minutes to get the bicycle master.
They can turn it down.
It's only 80 pages. I had to try it 3 times.
Chief, did you give her a badge?
Yeah.
Did you deputize her? That can't be official. That can't be official.
Hello, good evening, Mayor and City Council members. My name is Denise June Garcia, and I am a Management Fellow in the City Manager's Office. and I'm here today to talk to you about the draft strategic plan for the fiscal year 2020 to 2021.
We are thrilled to have you.
Thank you.
Welcome, and your services are much appreciated.
Thank you. So this is what today's presentation is going to look like. First, I will provide an overview of the updated City Council goal-setting process, followed by a review of the draft strategic plan with the new objectives added to it. And then we will review the objectives that will require additional resources. And lastly, I'll show what the next steps are moving forward, and we can close with questions, feedback, and public comment. Here's a condensed version of our three-step process for our City Council goal-setting process. The first took place on January 25th at the City Council workshop, where Council had the opportunity to revise list of objectives from the current strategic plan. They also added new objectives and adjusted and assigned priority levels to each objective. The second step is today at the City Council study session, where Council will review the draft strategic plan and proposed work plans, and we have space for public comment as well. And the third step will take place March 16th as a consent calendar item, with the final version of the draft ready for approval. So now that you've heard this condensed overview, let's move on to the review of the draft strategic plan. Here I will highlight the 13 new objectives that were added to the plan so that Council can review the language that we drafted. This is to ensure that we captured what the Council said during the first step at City Council workshop. Something to take note of is that there are two bolded items, the first being the Council focus area, which includes stewardship of infrastructure, quality of life, and etc. And then we also have the objective priority levels, which include A, B, C. Just to clarify, objectives with an A priority are resourced with staff and funding. Objectives with a B are next in line, and objectives with the C are for future initiatives that we want to keep on our radar. So let's review the objectives for each council area, and let's start with the stewardship of infrastructure. The first is to evaluate funding sources to dredge the marina. The second is evaluate feasibility of a green fleet by 2030. And next we have quality of life. We have 3 objectives: participate in the Age-Friendly Cities Initiative, consider adopting a firearms storage ordinance, and consider adopting an ordinance regulating vaping and e-cigarettes. Next, we have framing the future, and we have 5 objectives added. This includes track San Mateo County's disposable food serviceware regulation, evaluate potential mandates regarding composting in multifamily dwellings, implement the climate action plan and work to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, plan for the downtown grade separation and long-term train corridor improvements, evaluate our ability to do a standardized and routine statistically valid community survey that includes workforce and residents. And lastly, we have economic vitality, which include evaluate a street closure in the downtown on B Street, evaluate downtown parking and transit incentive programs for employees, and lastly, explore options to discourage commercial vacancies. So now we'll move forward with our required resources. So just to clarify, this discussion on resources is for all the objectives on the strategic plan and not just the newly added objectives that I just mentioned. So although many of the objectives can be accommodated within existing resources, there are a total of 8 objectives that may require staff resources or budget allocations. So here are the first 4. First is to evaluate the feasibility of a green fleet by 2030. And for this, we'll need an estimate of $25,000 for consulting services. Second, we have minimize impacts to residents from train horn noise at city at grade crossing. The funding for this project is to be secured through Section 130 program for 4th and 5th Avenue crossings. The third is explore banning smoking in commercial areas, and this will require significant staff time for outreach for businesses. The fourth is plan for the downtown grade separations and long-term train corridor improvements. There is an additional $1.3 million that are needed to fund the completion of design and environmental documentation. Next, we have enhance the customer experience downtown and in other commercial districts. and this will take an approximately $200,000 needed for an in-house downtown cleaning services. Next is evaluate downtown parking and transit incentive programs for employees. This is an estimate of $50,000 to study the options, and then up to $200,000 a year to implement those options that the city council wants to push forward. Seventh is to establishment of PBID. This will also require significant staff time for outreach to property owners. And the last one is to eliminate the city's unfunded pension and other public employee benefits liabilities by no later than 2050. And this will require council commitment to approve the discretionary expenditure each year.
$242 million.
So this concludes our portion of the review, and here are the next steps. First, we want to open up the discussion for public comment, and next we want to receive some feedback from the city council, and then lastly we'll implement the feedback given and present a final version of the strategic plan on March 16th for formal adoption.
Any questions from the council before we go to public comment? Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
No, go ahead, Rick.
Okay,
Sorry.
one question on the electrifying of our fleet. I see there's recommendation for $25,000 for a consultant to help with that. I believe.
Can we get PCE to do that for free?
Well, I believe there's actually a state law saying we have to do that by some certain time. And I'm wondering why we actually need a consultant, because we're not talking about clearly about skip loaders or dump trucks. I mean, we have things that need all, other fuels because they're heavier duty or equipment. But the cars that we see staff driving around in all over town, we already have a mixture. I think we have some plug-in hybrids and some regular hybrids. And I think when I recommended that we, make that move, before the state, I think, is recommending it now, what I was thinking was we just convert those vehicles that are day-to-day staff use, right? Because there are a lot of them. It's the majority of the vehicles that we have. Why do we need a consultant to do that?
Well, I think if the direction is to be compliant with whatever the state's having us be compliant with, and that we're already doing what we can to convert as it's feasible, I think we're okay to continue on that path without taking any further action. I'll defer to Brad if he wants to add any comment to that.
I think one of our thoughts was thinking a little bit further in what kind of things are on the horizon. We're not fully engaged constantly with what's on the horizon, so that was kind of the idea of hiring a consultant. But I mean, we are on track to make the changes that you talked about, and we can come back with just from our staff level, bringing that forward to you what that looks like.
Right.
And then if we need to move forward with anything other than that, we could go from there too.
So I think I heard you say you have a lot of priorities, and you have a budget, and you're trying to work all that out so you can do this too, right?
Yeah, well, I think we could, for your initial comment about, the fleet we have on the road, but our concern was some about the construction equipment stuff, because that's kind of
Right.
changing and evolving. But we can come back to council with just a staff level evaluation of that and where we're going and where we anticipate to be. We can do that within
Yeah.
existing resources.
Yeah.
It was just the broader context is what we were thinking about, needing some additional help.
Yeah, there are clearly different parts of this, right?
So if you'd like to start there,
Yeah.
happy to do that. We could come back in the fall, probably with September.
I really do think PCE should do a toolbox for every city. They should come up with a plan that any city can implement that goes as fast as you can to turn the fleet 100% renewable.
Actually, it could be one of our programs. So, why don't you write up what you think, and I'll get it in.
Raphael, get
Yeah.
him to do it.
Okay.
Eric, you had a?
Yes, when you were going over the resources it would take for the different priorities, a lot of the ones with the dollar signs I understood, but when you were talking about like significant staff time, what would that displace? Like, would that take the place of other priority one or a priority projects we have, or is it just, find the time for somebody to do it? Like, what's the real opportunity cost of those projects?
So both of those were things that were heavy on business outreach and outreach to property owners in the downtown, which would significantly impact the work plan of our economic development manager. So, you know, that job involves a lot of time spent on outreach to businesses, just for relationship building. So I think some of that would be impacted by doing these more focused projects, as well as some of the partner support to the chamber and the Downtown San Mateo Association. Other staff obviously will help with some of the outreach, but these are two initiatives that really require a lot of on-the-ground, door-to-door reaching out to both businesses and property owners, which does require a significant allocation of time.
I mean, and the reason I ask is because all this stuff looks great, but I just wonder like what falls if we pick all these.
And if I could just add to that, part of it's, when you take the first thing that I know we're not gonna do, in some cases, it's just a matter of dollars. We could add a consultant to do it. But for the things where we talk about significant staff time, it's something that we can't really contract out because so much of it is relationship-based. So it truly is the opportunity cost of other things in the work program that just can't get done.
Can I ask about the verb on, oh, go ahead.
Well, I had one thing, that and I don't wanna throw a monkey wrench in this and start adding stuff, but I thought we had talked about it, and it's something that's sort of important to me that I actually tapped onto the bike plan, was I would like to see every time we get something and what it costs, to have that element of, this might be a potential private funding source that we're gonna explore. And I don't know if you put that in as an objective, or if it's just an edict that is given to staff, every time something comes forward, here are some potential sources. We've spent a little staff time perhaps investigating it, that sort of thing. Maybe it's just a mantra or an edict, and it doesn't belong in our objectives, but.
It's the Pappen button.
Kinda, yeah.
Every time you give a presentation, we hit the Pappen button, and we wanna know.
Yeah, so I
I
don't know
think
how
we
you
took
go
that
about
as sort
this.
of a just do it in the
Mhm.
CIP as we're evaluating those
Cause it
projects.
certainly does relate to our economic vitality. And
Just
even-
do it, you like just do it.
Yes, well, I mean, and related to Eric's point, even like, or if we're talking about our unfunded pension obligations, it takes up a lot of money. If we can get money for other things, then there is more money to spend on our unfunded pension obligations, sort of thing. So you just think it's a staff mantra, but look, you failed, you came without it. But I'm hopeful that that is a part and parcel of every presentation we get as to its expense, and I don't know how we make sure that happens, but I would like to, if it's not here, I just wanna make sure it happens, and I hope
Let's
the
just get our
council
economic
first.
development director to do more outreach through the Chamber of Commerce to the businesses
That's true.
who are part of our community, and ask them to help make our community better.
Which we get less of if we choose some of.
I know, and then they work
Yeah.
together.
Right, I know, that was the
Anyway,
sticky part. right.
I don't wanna go sideways on you, it was just something that I just, you know, in my
Okay.
mind, that's economic vitality.
Well said, I appreciate you bringing that up. B Street, what's the verb as far as, is it studying, analyzing? If we go back to B Street?
Evaluate.
Closing it down, evaluate,
Yeah.
Evaluate, okay, so does evaluating include actually doing it for some events to show proof of concept?
So what we propose in the staff work plan for this is, first of all, to do outreach to all the businesses located along the segments and get an understanding of what their logistical needs are. So garbage service, delivery of goods to their businesses, and understand like where there's possibility. So it's one thing to close it for an evening, it's another thing to say for this week, you can't get any goods delivered, or they have to hand cart them from around the block, or, you know, there are implications, so we wanna study those. At the same time, we're gonna continue to host the September Night Zombie events. We're also, with the Special Event Task Force, going to analyze other possible events to have in the downtown, possibly with street closures. So that's sort of the proposed work plan for this next year. I appreciate the enthusiasm to just go ahead and close it, but there are possible implications that we should evaluate further.
Understood, thank you very much. And then can I go to dredging the lagoon? Okay, so evaluate funding sources to dredge the lagoon. Does that include engaging the sea level rise and resiliency district for possible grants through them, helping, asking them for help, and coordinating with Foster City and Belmont, who both touch on the lagoon in ways where they could support us in gathering funding and getting a groundswell of support.
Yeah, I think we'd look at every opportunity we have to find funding for that effort.
Well,
I don't know that we get cooperation from our neighbors to help fund it, but they would probably support us, and I think that's what you're getting at, and us getting funding from elsewhere.
I will personally solicit a letter from them. I will personally reach out to them to get them to be part of the effort. So I'm
I
not.
think they'd be happy to do that, they just won't bring a check.
Understood. Understood. And I'll ask them for the check if it gets to that point, but, getting all of them to sign on to a letter where we then ask Diane for money from the.
Well, I just wanted to get to that.
Then that'd be good.
It has this
How much-
district
how
has a
much money you got?
3-year runway until there is a permanent source of funding identified by way of perhaps a bond measure, we'll see. There are probably 3 prototype projects within the county that we're zeroing in on right now that probably would include the marina in the next 3 years.
Wouldn't it?
Would not.
Oh.
Would not. Do I sound like Trump? I don't know why I wouldn't. No, would not. There are some multi-jurisdictional projects that are existing right now that we're gonna focus in on to use as a prototype to then perhaps get permanent funding. So I don't, in other words, timetable-wise, it's not gonna be in the next 3 years for something like the marina, but the concept is certainly laudable.
I don't know how long it's gonna take to dredge the lagoon, but they've been waiting a lot more than 3 years, and so if it takes that long to get all the funding, that's sooner than we would otherwise be able to do it. I think I've met with the people at the lagoon, along with a lot of other council members, and so a couple of things that they brought up that I just wanna find out if it falls within evaluating funding sources. One was the new district, one was Measure S, and that's a question for another day about whether there's Measure S funding that could help out with that. Another was combining it with the North Shoreview levee project, whether that dirt can be repurposed, and I don't know. Anyway, I think what I wanna see is more than just evaluating, is what I'm getting at, and if evaluating means we're not gonna move the needle very far, I'd really like to, move this forward, because in many ways, the lagoon is the city of San Mateo's biggest park. And it's something that people really, appreciate and value, and something that dramatically affects that neighborhood, and I do think we could get support from our neighbors in Foster City and Belmont, so this is me saying, I'm not sure evaluate fully captures the verb that I'd like to see there. With that having been said, if anybody else has a question, I'm gonna go to public comment. Is there any public comment other than Drew?
Can I make a quick comment about this? So
Please.
what our intent with the evaluation is to bring back to council for further direction on which option you'd like us to move forward with, so if that
You've
helps.
got options at 6 million, 9 million, 25 million?
But also, how do we fund those, right? So any of those.
Diane's gonna pay for it with the sea level rise district.
Well, maybe you wanna get it done before 3 years, so.
I do. Maybe we need to
So
pass that.
That's the intent, though.
Maybe we
So
need to
we're
pass
hopeful.
that 1/4 cent sales tax this year. Drew?
Go to Oculus, they're impacting us. We haven't talked to them yet, have we?
So may I suggest maybe we change
Gillian.
that objective to evaluate options and funding sources?
Please. If that would.
So that includes some of the design and project options.
I think you hear me. Thank you very much. Drew, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you again. I'll race through this. So just on that last topic, I thought the district, though, was also developing a grand, long list of projects. They're not focused, but like a master list. And I don't remember seeing this on that master list at this time. So it's just like a long
Diane's
list.
gonna put it on there.
So,
We trust you.
So, this item wasn't shown on the list, but every time I see something about repair all smooth streets or all failed street, I struggle at the word all, because is that all as of the year 2000 when that study was done? Is
All
that?
period, all period. There will be no failed streets, 0 failed streets.
Okay,
Not-
that's an
there won't be-
ongoing challenge.
There
That's
won't be
great.
new failed streets, there will be no new failed streets. At the point where there are no failed streets, that's what we're talking.
Great.
And then we stop.
Well, and presumably, once you fix them, they have so much greater longevity. I recognize that it could be fluid, but
That's what I.
they become much more durable after you fix them.
Keep them sealed.
The grade step for downtown, it's like one slide farther. I would just add one word, plan for downtown / remaining grade separations and long-term grade corridor, because there's 2 grade steps that are like north of downtown.
Hilltop and,
I think that should all be part of it. Now, how they're resolved is, but just so those neighborhoods don't think, well, what about us and stuff, so it's, because they're, I think.
You mean the
technically-
at-grade parking at Bellevue and State Street or whatever
So I
it is?
think, yeah, those
Villa
2
Terrace?
streets, so
Okay,
without
yeah.
just a slash.
I think they're gonna be a part of the train horn noise too.
Yeah.
And I appreciate this one on there. I do have a question, when I looked through the detail, I didn't quite understand the $1 million and stuff. Does that mean nothing gets done? Or that's what will take over several years, $1 million? Like, is this year just 50,000 in matching funds to just start the process and stuff? So, and then quality of life, I do appreciate the one about smoking, and actually recently have been aware. I live near the hospital, and the hospital has a county no smoking policy. You walk on Edison Street and there are hundreds of smoking butts. And we went to a hospital community meeting and raised this up, and they don't wanna build a little smoking area. Basically, the street's the smoking area. And I think the city, it's just to point out, it's not just downtown, it's literally, the workers, the visitors, they park, they smoke on the street, it's a mess. And it's just an example, not just a downtown thing. And then, sorry, one last thing on the private funding. I think a great example of this is the Fifth Avenue new parking garage that's gonna be built. There's gonna be a 5-story solid wall on the PG&E side. To me, instead of that wall being an eyesore, it can be a signature feature of San Mateo, and a private company potentially could have their little logo somewhere and whatever's done there. Cause I think of like Planet Granite would love to have a climbing thing on the weekends there or something. Like, there's just opportunity to make that an asset, and a private company potentially with their logo in the corner could help fund that.
Drew, great comments, great idea. I'm gonna bring it back to, close the public comment period, bring it back to the council. Any final comments before we?
Yeah.
Yes, Rick?
Sure. I want to go back to the lagoon for a minute. I've been out there 3 times. I visited the southern end of the lagoon twice. I visited the pumps. Pumps are great. They're in good working order. That's all nice, good to understand, and how the water rises and arrives and leaves. But the thing is, on the south end right now, all they have is like a creek, and everything else is dry. All the birds that are normally there are not there, right? The entire habitat there is completely disrupted by having this level of silt built up in the lagoon. And I would urge us to move as quickly as possible to find some way to fund and get moving on it. There are 2 public groups out there, at least, that have actually coalesced. The one that Rick Sakuda is with, they've been there for like 10 or 15 years, working on nothing but the lagoon, right? And then this other one with the ladies who have recently invited us from the south end. They care deeply. I mean, and
I wanna point out for the record that at least 3 of them were here tonight.
Yes.
They came at 5:30 to speak during public comment. I don't know why they weren't able to stay, but I understood what they were gonna ask, and I think I brought it up. Hopefully I was fair to what they were gonna say. Sorry for
Through the
cutting.
mayor, if I can, they're coming back at 7.
Okay,
for
great.
public comment.
Perfect. So we'll hear from them again.
And one more thing. I see a lot of items up here that call for a lot of work by our economic development director. And I know she's only one person. Yes, she has good relationships with all the parties we need to work with on these different things. But I'm thinking, we have a lot of stuff that needs to get done. And clearly, we all recognize that. That's why it's on the list. And I'm wondering if it might be time to get some help, somebody else to work with her, an understudy, somebody else to learn the relationships, the ropes, everything else that needs to be done down there.
More fellows, yeah.
I suggested that to her today. I spoke with her, but she seems to feel like it's a lot of work to get up to speed. But I need to throw it on the table. I think it's more work than she can do by herself.
Thank you, Rick. Eric, anything?
I agree with.
Good of the order?
I have one thing.
Councilmember Lee?
So, during the workshop, I think I raised a prioritization of childcare supply, and then I went back to the previous year's notes, and it looks like it fell off of the list because the tasks were completed. But I thought during our workshop, it was still on the work plan and part. So I'm just trying to figure out where that is. I think it is a priority that we all share. And so even if it's just to give it some daylight and visibility, I think it makes sense to keep it on our list.
I second that emotion.
Anyone?
What's that?
Childcare?
Yes.
Yeah, I
It's-
agree.
for me,
Childcare
yes.
needs to be a priority, but I think we've already got some stuff going on it.
I think it's still a priority, and staff are already working on it, and Heather will bring us any opportunities for us to pull the trigger on something.
Yes.
Do you wanna add it back to the strategic plan? My apologies if you removed that.
I would like to see it in there.
Sure.
It's a big enough
Yeah, I agree.
priority.
Yeah.
Anything else that you need from us, Kathy?
So you guys are good with all the current assigned priorities? So things that are assigned A's versus B's?
Well, there is one change to, I think maybe moving the one priority, the county just passed a ban on single-use, disposable plasticware. And so that was something that we were tracking. Now we know what the outcome is, and so potentially that could be elevated.
Yes, well said. I don't know why I forgot to say that. I thought,
Good catch, Joe.
I do think that, that's gonna be an easier one for us to actually take action on this year, given that it's moving very fast.
So it is important to note that while it may be very easy to draft the ordinance language, given that the county has developed probably a strong ordinance for adoption that other jurisdictions can consider, there's a lot of work that goes within that priority with outreach to the business community. The county has very limited restaurants in their unincorporated area, which their ordinance covers, whereas our downtown is 150 restaurants strong, a lot of which are primarily fast casual and serve everything in disposable containers already. So it would require probably a significant amount of outreach if you wanted to in advance to make sure they're aware of this and have any comments if they have concerns with the county ordinance. And then with implementation, that's another one where the economic development manager would play, along with sustainability staff and Roxanne Murray, who handles solid waste, would need to do a significant amount of outreach to make sure that all the restaurants in our community are aware of this, understand the options that are available for them. So it's easy to come up with the ordinance language. It is still a very high, staff-intensive objective.
Can I restate that in this way, which is to say, whether it's implementation of an ordinance or whether it's the outreach to prepare the business community, either way, it's an A because we want to be working on it right now. Is that fair? Any objection to that from the council?
What you're saying is there's outreach that has to be done in order to adopt.
And
Right,
then
because you
outreach-
want their input, want to frame it just so, but what we know is that the county already has
And Half
a
Moon Bay.
sample.
But they're
and they've
Which has a
got-
lot of restaurants as well.
But to do
So
that
that's-
outreach and to prepare the business community would
For the
also make it
adoption.
an A, whether we're adopting an ordinance or not, we're doing that this year. And so action this year would make it an A
Mhm.
by the way we
Absolutely.
characterize A's. So that's the last
And
thing that I have.
But it may be that the implementation follows thereafter, and the legwork with the implementation may take us into next year. But I think what the mayor is saying is, let's get to the adoption part, and by doing that, we would make it an A for adoption.
That makes a lot of sense to me.
Get it?
Yeah.
A for adoption.
Got it.
So then
Yes.
when we come
City
back, I don't know
manager.
if we're gonna put this on consent, because we are gonna have to really think about the resources in economic development, because this is all gonna fall in that office. And so,
Jennifer's gonna be talking to him, it's just a slightly longer conversation with each of them. This entire program is extremely ambitious. We have thrown everything that we think should be happening, and we understand that there are limited resources, and this is the first time you're coming back to us out of 3 times, so we know where we are in this process, and we're not there yet. We're not at the end yet. Yes? With that, we're adjourned. We'll come back for the regular meeting at 7 o'clock in 10 minutes in the chambers. Thanks, everybody.
Where's the easy button?